Hi guys, I'm Larry, originally from China, but currently living in America. Well, to say that I'm living in America isn't entirely true. Actually, I've been on my deathbed for many months. I have end-stage lung cancer, and after a long period of postoperative radiation therapy, the doctors have let me go home for almost a month now. My cancer cells have metastasized, and there are no more effective treatments. I was advised to try to enjoy the last days of my life, but things didn't go so smoothly. Until the last days of my life, I still couldn't die in peace. My family immigrated to the United States when I was just a teenager. My parents have only one child, and they've tried to give me the best future possible. We spent all the money we had at that time to move to America. My parents couldn't speak any English, and they relied on me to handle all immigration procedures. I grew up with so many expectations and responsibilities that my parents placed on me. My mother is a person who attaches great importance to appearance. During my adulthood, she made sure to remind me every day that I can never let outsiders look down on my family. I must always dress well, use brand stuff, and nurture dreams of owning luxury cars. We were so poor when we first got to the US, and my parents had to work hard to send me to college to become a dentist. And I, so used to being told what to do, did not resist, but followed their orders, although many nights I cried silently and blamed them for everything. The day I completed my studies, became a certified dentist, and opened my own clinic was the happiest day of my parents' life. To me, it was just the day I woke up from one nightmare and entered an uncertain future of trying to make as much money as possible to repay my parents' merits. Gradually, with the money I made from my always busy clinic, I bought a more spacious house, and eventually, the villa we're living in now with 2 luxury cars. I didn't socialize with many friends, and of course I never dated anyone. But that was not a big problem, because my mother had my marriage taken care of, just like any other thing in my life. The girl I was matched with was Laura, a Chinese American. Contrary to my normal appearance, Laura has a pretty face, with long, sleek black hair and a bright smile. At the first meeting, I immediately liked Laura, and surprisingly, she liked me very much too. Well, by that time, my clinic was quite well known locally already, and I had made quite a lot of money. Maybe that was why an angel like her noticed me. We got married quickly. Laura gave me a daughter and a son in just 3 years. She was devastated when her beauty was affected severely after 2 births, and she had an uncontrolled appetite. As my work at the clinic became busier, coming home to my wife nagging about the maid stealing things or the neighbor's children being sent to a more luxury international school really just made me feel more stressed. Laura went from a princess to a witch. I felt afraid of coming home, so I spent more time in the clinic, even though I had nothing to do after hours. At that time, my clinic had a very hot intern named Dorothy. I accepted her for the position with a high salary because I was strongly impressed by her appearance during the first interview. The relationship between us kept developing after every accidental hand touch when we reached for the clinic equipment, and especially after every time I told my wife that I had to stay in the clinic until late at night, while actually, I went to dinner with Dorothy before going to the hotel with her. Such a scandalous story couldn't be hidden for long. I was at the height of my career and was very proud of the fact that an over 40-year-old man like me could date a beautiful 20-year-old girl like Dorothy. I didn't take any precautions, spent a lot of money just to please my lover without knowing when my wife was suspicious. Things only became illuminated that night Dorothy and I were about to step into the familiar 4-star hotel when Laura caught us right there. My wife had followed me closely and discovered everything 1 to 2 weeks before. She didn't make a fuss in front of the hotel to save me face. I was a coward, not daring to stand up for my lover, but just standing still when Laura pulled Dorothy into the corner for a while before returning alone. That was the last time I saw Dorothy, because she resigned and moved out of town the next day. As for me and my wife, that night was very long. Laura cried a lot and blamed me for everything. I felt guilty and just wished that she could keep everything a secret between us because I couldn't face my children and my parents' harsh gaze. The next morning, Laura suddenly changed her mind and promised me she would keep everything a secret. Of course, I agreed and begged her to forgive me. Not long after that, my mother passed away from old age. My father had passed away before my mom from a serious illness. In her last days, With the little remaining strength, my mother called me a family disgrace for betraying my wife. She said that she would never forgive me and would haunt me to make sure I would not betray my wife again. So Laura hadn't kept her promise. I was angry, but I was in no position to accuse her of anything. After my mother's funeral, I spent even more time at work to avoid everything. Our marriage was never the same after Dorothy. We put on our happy masks to impress outsiders and hide things from our children, but in reality, we didn't have much love left. I was a bad father who was absent from my 2 children's lives, and the only way I could please them was money. Despite sharing the same bed, I didn't pay much attention to Laura for a long time. Then one day, when I came home unexpectedly early, I was startled to see my wife wearing a tight dress with her hair up, showing off the slim features on her face. Wow, my wife had improved her beauty and physique significantly, but I didn't notice. At that moment, I suddenly felt the need to work harder to save our marriage, and God gave me the best reason to receive 100% attention from her. Disaster struck when I turned 50. I found out I had lung cancer. In the early days of discovering my illness, Laura changed her attitude 180 degrees. She suddenly took good care of me and said more loving words than ever. She also brought her friends over to cheer me up. Among them, Laura seemed to be especially close to Dave, her barber, and his wife. To be honest, I didn't really like him because he seems unreliable. I completed my will, dedicating all of my fortunes to my wife and children. The past months, I had to rely on others to take care of me. Just yesterday, Laura said she was going to the supermarket and asked Dave to come over to look after me. After Laura had left for about 30 minutes, I was so thirsty. I called for Dave, but he didn't answer. I became worried, wondering what that guy was doing in my house. I decided to go to the kitchen to get water myself, but as soon as I exited the door, I was drawn to the loud giggles from the next room, one of which was Laura's voice. Wondering why she was back, but didn't come into my room to inform me as always, I leaned against the wall to reach the door of that room. I heard Laura screaming softly, as if muffled. I immediately opened the door, but before my eyes was an unbelievable sight. In that room, Laura and Dave were doing exactly the same things Dorothy and I did. I was dumbfounded at what was happening, and could only shout, "Laura!" before slumping to the floor. When Dave saw me, he panicked, and hurriedly grabbed his clothes on the floor. But Laura's attitude was unbelievable. She didn't seem scared, but looked me in the eye and smirked before saying, "Oh, Larry, finally you found out. God, I had to try to be so noisy as possible for a week, but couldn't catch your attention. Finally, you've seen what you deserve." Now understand the feeling of being betrayed in marriage. It's just so much worse, though, because you are dying and your wife is blatantly having sex with another man in the house you bought. As she spoke, she laughed like a madwoman. Everything faded before my eyes. I didn't know whether it was because of tears or it was my final push to the grave. I don't want to live another day, guys. I just want to die right now. Please give me an advice. I know I don't deserve any forgiveness or support, but at least help my kids get out of this circle of hatred.